In flood insurance news, the federal government has recently changed the rules in relation to flood insurance, and Florida has joined 9 other states in a federal lawsuit that challenge these regulations. Flood insurance, as I'm sure homeowners know, is almost never offered by private insurance companies. That is because it's offered by the federal government. So why would they to some degree? Because the federal government will do it for them and take away their risk profile. So yay. So the federal government offers the flood insurance when private insurances don't. But of course, that leads to problems because who do we insure and how and when? And as we know from a lot of hurricanes, for example, this can be quite expensive. So maybe we should change the rules to perhaps discourage people to build houses in certain floodplains. Well, whatever the rules are, of course, we're going to sue over it as it might relate to current homeowners, new homeowners, value of property, and so forth and so on. So let's learn a little bit more about this. Florida has joined 9 other states in a lawsuit that challenged the overhaul to the National Flood Insurance Program, arguing that the system is flawed and will drive up premiums for many property owners, which maybe it should drive up premiums a little bit because it's been expensive. The lawsuit, which is led by Louisiana, which was filed in Thursday in federal court in Louisiana against the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The change came after program changes in 2021 became fully effective April the 1st. The program plays a major role for Florida residents, many of whom are required to have flood insurance because of home mortgages. Yeah, you know, if you live in anywhere that's a floodplain or a hurricane place, I would definitely require you to get flood insurance as well as homeowners insurance because it's my asset, right? I'm the bank. I have a lien on your home from the mortgage. So I want you to protect my asset because it is my insurance against your default. So if the asset disappears, I lose my security. That makes me really sad. So yes, I would probably require you to have the insurance. That would be a good thing. A document in the lawsuit says the program includes about 1.4 million Florida policies with a total coverage of $360 billion. There's a lot of homes in Florida that are covered by the home insurance. So $360 billion. Louisiana, Florida, and other states are challenging the new rule, which is known as Risk Rating 2.0 Equity in Action, that proposes to change the methodology for determining the price. Among other things, the lawsuit alleges the system improperly considers hypothetical future risks and doesn't properly account for mitigation projects to protect property against flood damage. So, I mean, all future risk is to some degree hypothetical because, of course, it hasn't happened yet. But, you know, we can kind of see trend data and stuff like that, and our risk aversion as an insurance company is growing. And also, how good is that mitigation project? Also, when we're considering insurance, we typically consider it en masse. So we look to what's kind of true of the community in general rather than individual efforts for the most part. So, but we're not taking enough things into account, we say, federal government, okay. While the agency, FEMA, paints a picture of a nuanced calculation using massive data repositories that reveal a property's individualized risk, the reality is much simpler. Flood insurance is going to be much more expensive for pretty much everyone. Well, maybe, yes. We did all the computer modeling using the computers, crunching a lot of data, looking at trends, and we can't help noticing that these floods and the hurricanes and so forth are costing us a lot of money. So yes, flood insurance might be a lot more expensive, but maybe that's just because it's the price. People want to live in the floodplain, you know, we want to insure against the flood. It's going to be a little bit expensive. So, yeah. A section of the lawsuit that focuses on Florida says high insurance rates will cause people to leave the state of Florida because they can no longer afford to live there. Well, at least not in the floodplain part, which, depending on how we calculate that for Florida, could potentially be a lot of the state because Florida is very, very, very flat. So, yeah. In addition, it will depress property values, particularly in areas where flood insurance is required. But FEMA says on its website that it revamped systems that take into account more variables that affect flooding and result in rates that are actually actuarially sound, equitable, easier to understand, and better reflect actual risk. For example, it said the previous system did not account for the cost of rebuilding homes because it only accounted for the materials in the home. So how much is the home worth? Well, it's worth $300,000. Okay, but how much does it cost to actually rebuild the house? Right? Because there's labor involved. The labor is going to cost some money. So we only were insuring the material worth of the house. We didn't account for the labor necessary to rebuild it. So, yeah. Policyholders with lower value homes may have been paying more than their high share of risk, while policyholders with higher value homes may have been paying less than their share of risk, the agency said. Risk rating 2.0 was not just a minor improvement, but a transformational leap forward for the NFIP. Not for nothing, but agencies, I'd really avoid using the phrase leap forward. It doesn't have great historical connotations. So, yeah. The Attorney General signed off on the lawsuit for Florida, along with Louisiana. The other plaintiffs are Idaho, Kentucky, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, Virginia, and other local governments in Louisiana as well. The 146-page lawsuit makes a series of allegations, including they violated the Administrative Procedures Act by making changes that are arbitrary and capricious. The Administrative Procedures Act is your go-to law. If the federal government is doing something, typically it is governed by the APA. It is the thing that applies to most federal agency action that requires, it is the rule for rules. How do you go about establishing rules? That's what the Administrative Procedures Act is. How do you go about, what are the rules for creating rules? And most federal agencies are bound by them. And so it is often used as a mechanism to attack agency action. It's like you didn't follow the rules properly. In this case, by making changes we allege are arbitrary, which of course the government is allowed to do. They're not allowed to be arbitrary. As part of the argument, pointing to FEMA's consideration of climate change, which it says does not relate to the risk of property today, which climate change is, of course, a long-term concern. But then, of course, these houses are going to be there for a long time. So building in some of that risk now doesn't sound completely irrational, but that's what they're arguing. Equity in action uses a catastrophic modeling, which takes into account hypothetical future events. All future events are hypothetical, including hypothetical events resulting from climate change, the lawsuit says. The agency does not disclose what these hypothetical events are, nor does the agency explain how the hypothetical events change based on hypothetical climate activity. It's a model. It's a model. It's based off past trends, past predictions, a little bit of guessing in the future, a little bit of tea leaves. The computer modeling helps a little bit and sort of some of the stuff. So, yeah, but we're really unhappy with the number because it's going to cost us money, right? We like it when the federal government pays attention to the climate, except when it costs us money. So, yeah. The lawsuit, in part, seeks an injunction against the new system and a requirement that federal officials disclose the methodology and data that they used. Okay. So we'll see how that all develops, but I have my doubts on that. Thus, that brings us to the end of the story for the moment about FEMA being challenged on its new insurance program for flooding. They have come up with a revised system that takes into account more things based on computer modeling and also concern about the climate. We're also concerned that states like Florida might be underwater in the future based on current models. So we are wanting to change the price when it comes to insuring the homes, both to account for the cost of rebuilding the homes, because suddenly we realize we forgot to do that, so our bad, and also to account for these things, which are hypothetical, but then again, we are reasonably predicting they're occurring. So we're challenging this under the Administrative Procedures Act. We'll see how that all progresses. And that, for the moment, brings us to the end of discussion of this story.